Let's continue prepping this fuel tank for painting. Welcome to Urban Monk TV. So if you recall, we had a lot of surface rust here and there, and we got out the little wire wheel on the Dremel and we scraped, and what was left was just minor little bits of rust that might be pitted into the metal, and we used this Permatex rust treatment to neutralize that, or to convert it to something inert that's not going to continue to corrode underneath the paint job that we intend to do here. And I mentioned that when, if you've watched these videos, you already know where this goes. This stuff leaves a layer of, it looks like you just put like an acrylic house paint that's a clear coat on there, and it's just a mess and looks terrible. And so we're going to wire wheel this off. So I find the easiest way to cut through this layer of the rust treatment is with a wire wheel, and I tried this really light duty Dremel one first on the rotary tool. Just a little bit too light duty for this. It has been curing over the last week, so it's dried on there pretty hard, but with the hand drill and a larger wire wheel I'm making progress. And I'm not worried about scratching the paint because I'm going to end up roughing this paint all up to prime over it anyways. And what I'm trying to get to here is, you can see like on this spot, I think that camera angle shows this area that has the layer of coating on it. And I just want to get down to where that is gone, because it isn't a primer, and it's certainly not an enamel primer, which is the paint system I'm going to use on here. So that's what we want to remove, and I'll show you how I'm doing that. Not quite. Almost. There. Now, still a little bit right there. And we may finish this with a sanding block, just to make sure I've removed all the material. So clearly there's a lot of wire wheeling I've got to do here, and I'm going to spare you guys tons and tons of video of that. But that's what I'm going to do, is just get this all smooth again, and when I get underneath there isn't rust there, and when I put new paint down there won't be rust there. So we're going to wire wheel, then we're going to sand, and that's it. Hey, I wanted to mention one thing. You might have noticed I'm wearing a different t-shirt than some of the previous ones I've had. I'm happy to have just gotten this in the mail. This is Bike-urious, and this is a website that I've been looking at it for a couple of years now. Back when I was in Minnesota, I'm obsessed with bikes, and online looking around I see Jay Leno's Garage is a show that I like to watch. And he's got this gentleman, he's actually got two guys on. One of them is a guy named Abby who has this website, and he's obsessed with bikes also. And you see a lot of his content if you're following motorcycles enough. He seems to be everywhere, and he also seems to be a really nice guy. And I like what he's doing with his site. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and he is. And he's taken his passion for motorcycles and put it into this site where he curates interesting, fascinating motorcycles that are not your everyday typically. You know, a lot of custom bikes, a lot of vintage bikes, a lot of bikes you just don't see every day, and they're for sale. And if you have one for sale, you can list it on his site. So it's a place to go that if you're looking for a bike that's unique, you probably can find something there that'll really tickle your fancy, so to speak. And if you just want to educate yourself on what is possible out there, what was built at one time, you know, if you don't know what a Zundap is, or you know, a Norton or a Triton, you know, you'll find the answers there as well as other places too. But great site for anybody that's got the addiction to motorcycles like I do, and like he obviously does. And then I just really have a soft spot for people that take their passion and turn it into a career, because I did that with a hobby of mine. Not this, but maybe someday. We'll see where this goes. Right now I'm busy with another hobby that turned into a passion, and that's my day job. But you know, you got to pay the bills. But bike-urious, check it out. Maybe I'll get lucky enough to get together with Abby and meet him, and maybe we'll have him on the show sometime. I don't know. I don't want to make expectations out there. But anyways, check out bike-urious. Great site. So I've been working away at this for about, I don't know, half hour now. And sparing you guys all that boring video. And it's come down to kind of a combination of three things. There's spots where I need the little rotary tool to get into the crevices, and then I need the big guy to just grind away big chunks of this stuff. And then I'm going around and finishing with a fine grit foam sanding block. And I'm using foam because when you're dealing with a surface you want to paint, don't use your fingers. You may think that that's flexible and will give enough to give you a smooth texture, but it actually will make uneven spots if you're holding sandpaper with your bare hand. And then if you use like a rigid block, then you're just going to get the high spots only, and this will contour the best, you know, to something that's got curves and rounded surfaces to it like this. So kind of some of both that I've been doing, and just going around, and then I just feel with my hand. And this is where kind of the craftsman piece comes in, where I want this smooth as glass. And that's not going to happen at this stage entirely, but I'll kind of get there as close as I can. Another thing is that I'm not going like this. I'm just using little random orbiting motions. I mean, that's why they call it a random orbital sander. Usually little circles, and I'll reverse direction, and just keep it moving all the time, and remove that material evenly. I don't want high spots, and I don't want to focus on one little area so much that I create a low spot. Now ultimately we're going to have some, because this tank has dents in it. No doubt we're going to have low spots that we need to fill in, but we're going to get to that in a later step. So pretty much the key is keep things moving all the time. Soft foam block, although even, I don't know what grit this is, I'd love to tell you. It's the Harbor Freight fine grit. They have two different grits of these foam blocks. So this is the fine. If I had to guess, I'd say it's 300, something like that. It's pretty aggressive for paint. But at this stage, I want aggressive. And I am getting my new Bike-Urious t-shirt dirty. I knew that would happen. So one other thing I'd like to talk about while I'm doing all this sanding is, kind of mentioned this a little bit in a previous episode, and I've been thinking more about it since, and actually took some action. I want to tell you about that. So I mentioned that I'm concerned about the future of motorcycling because, well, the cost of entry is higher, I think, than it used to be. The skill sets, I mean, it used to be that every guy that rode a bike also was a guy that knew how to turn a wrench. And to some extent, there's still a bit of that that's necessary, but it's far less than it used to be. So maybe that's the upside to the higher price of entry, is you're getting fuel-injected, reliable, computer-controlled bikes, and frankly, that are safer than the old ones. You've got IMUs and traction control and ABS and all of these technologies that are making new riders safer and making old riders better. And so there's a lot of upside in motorcycling, but I'm still concerned that, you know, there's too much, I don't know, screen and video games and that kind of thing, and a lot of emphasis on the virtual world and not as much on the real world. And long story short, I've already made it long. I want to do my thing to help continue the industry and the passion that is motorcycling. And so this site is in large part of that. I've picked up some skills over the years that I just want to share, and hopefully someone else will take something away from this and go have fun with their life and continue motorcycling. And frankly, the more people that are into motorcycling, the cheaper bikes are and the cheaper parts are, because the larger the industry, the more economies of scale that there are there. So anyways, my brother-in-law is in his 30s, has never ridden a motorcycle. I think I gave him a ride on that Goldwing I borrowed from my buddy Brad a while back, a couple of times. And, you know, I introduced him to it a little bit right there. Take somebody for a ride, even if it's another guy. Don't be afraid of the two-up thing. You know, it is what it is. And because you can really turn on a light bulb with people just giving them a ride. So then he recently has another friend, buys some 50cc little mopeds, and he's riding those and having just a blast with it. And he's visiting my house a couple of months ago and is talking to my wife, his sister, saying, yeah, I'm going to get a bike someday. And she said, really? And he said, oh yeah, I'll definitely have a motorcycle. You know, so right there, here's an interested new rider. So what did I do? It's Christmas season. I went ahead and ordered him up a gift 12-month subscription to Cycle World magazine. So what have I done there? One, I didn't spend much money because a gift subscription to a motorcycling magazine is not very expensive. But now he's got access to more and more information, and I'll feed his curiosity. At the same time, I'm helping another part of the industry that's really necessary, and that's the publishing side of it. Those magazines are important to the industry, and yes, there's websites also, but they maintain both, and they need revenue to do it. Frankly, I'm sick of looking at chewing tobacco ads in all the motorcycling magazines. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say they should take a stand against unhealthy things for motorcyclists, but they need the revenue, and that's why that stupid tobacco ad is there in the magazine, is because they need the revenue. Well, they wouldn't need to take that kind of revenue if we supported them more with subscriptions and that kind of thing. So I bought a subscription for my brother-in-law, killing two birds with one stone, feeding his interest, helping the industry continue. Didn't cost me a lot of money, but I'm staying engaged with it. So there's some thoughts on the future of motorcycling and what I and maybe you can do to help it. So another thing that can really help with this kind of work is a lot of light. So as soon as the sun came up, I came outside here because the more light you have, the better your eyes work. Of course, you've still got your sense of touch for smoothness, but light really helps. So now that I got some, I'm using it. This is a good point. The sanding block can help you identify low spots that aren't that easy to see otherwise, but you can see how the dust is gathering in this little valley as the sanding block is hitting all of the higher surface around it. So it's helpful in identifying. And when we get to doing the Bondo work or filler work to fill these in, I learned a trick from a guy that's got a YouTube channel called Hack a Week TV. And I believe he used to make surfboards a lot too, and done a lot of sanding, a lot of fiberglass work, a lot of Bondo work, and a lot of painting. He also made a couple of cafe racers. So that trick is yet to come, but another episode. And then as the dust builds up here, it can be hard to identify what you need to be focusing on, so it's nice to have a cloth out here. Just wipe all that dust away and you can see the areas you gotta focus on a little bit more closely. I can even just get in with the tip of a corner and work on a little spot. And then there are spots like this where it's clearly dented in here, and there's no doubt that this is going to get filled in with Bondo or filler putty. And so you may think, well then, why even focus on that so much? It's still important to sand this and rough it up to give that Bondo something good and rough to stick to, because the adhesion of that Bondo is going to be critical. That down many miles down the road, when this tank is taking on a lot of vibration, that your big chunk of Bondo just doesn't flake right off of there and fall off. So like paint, Bondo needs a rough surface to adhere to. Here's another one that we just showed earlier, that sanding has identified our low spot. So I'm not just going to ignore that. I know I need a rough surface in here, so I'm going to get my sanding block down in that thing. Really focus on roughing it up. A lot of random movements. Maybe switch corners, get right down in that little spot. So now when we fill that in, we'll have something to stick to. Underneath here we had rust, and I did mention that we wanted to address that in there, and we will be painting in here, although this is a bit less visible. You're going to see some of these surfaces here when it's on the bike, but not a great deal. So less concerned, was more concerned about treating rust, but as far as a nice smooth finish, I'll rough sand in there, and I'm not going to bother with any fillers or anything like that. But I'll get this all cleaned up, and
When we get to painting, we'll certainly spray primer in here and maybe even some color, but not a lot of emphasis in this area. It's all about controlling the rust, not so much about the cosmetics, except for these areas that will be visible. They'll get some attention. A couple other attached items that have to come off as we prep this tank for painting is this latch for the cover that goes over this fill cap. So that's an 8mm, a couple of 8mm bolts. And I'll keep those in there for now so I don't lose them. When I paint, I'll pull these off. This is obvious where this goes. Those are less obvious. So. And then last but certainly not least is our Cutcock valve. And these are 10mm, but they're arranged in a way where you can't get a socket down on them, so I'm just using an open-end wrench. These are going to take just a loosening, and then what you can get on them, and they were thinking about us here, a Phillips. So let me grab that. It's really probably not a Phillips. It's probably JIS of some kind, but I've just got a number 2 Phillips here. Really looks like a number 3 would be the perfect fit. There is a screen here you want to be careful with, and a gasket that we may want to replace, but a pretty simple assembly. Essentially, here's where you're pulling gas from until you get to reserve, and then reserve would kick in here and run down to here, if that makes sense. This is in pretty good shape, pretty clean. There's some schnuts down there that we'll have to pull out, but be careful with these screens. Don't damage them, put holes in them. They protect your carbs from getting all clogged up. Another thing I got is a lot of grease and grime in here that I'm just going to use this general engine degreaser. You could use kerosene or mineral spirits or something, but I'm just going to wipe this down, get this grease out of here. I mean, it's thick. There's years of it here. Being careful up here not to get down inside the tank. And wearing gloves, of course, trying to protect my skin from absorbing a lot of these chemicals, but working outside so that I've got good ventilation. But I'm not perfect. You know, if you really scour through these videos, you'll see me sanding indoors without ventilation and without some sort of respirator on. And you know, I'm human. I just kind of dive into stuff sometimes and don't think about safety, and I try to do my best, but you know, try to remember your gloves. I got another tip for how I try to stay healthy around some of these chemicals, and the dust, and the metal dust is another one, like aluminum and that kind of a thing. I'll talk a bit about that in just a second. Okay, so protecting your health in the garage, just real quick. I mean, there's hearing protection, and sometimes I run a tool for about 10 minutes before I realize to put these on, but you know, I eventually put them on. Get a set of these. What are they, $1.99? Not much. Some safety goggles. Again, I wear glasses all the time, so I've always got some limited protection there, but there's a lot of space up underneath these things that these cover better. Try to do that stuff. I'm not perfect. But then, okay, so then what about when I'm
using like a flap disc and sanding, and I'm getting dust of metals, I'm getting dust of paints and clear coats, I'm getting dust of, I'm getting chemicals, I'm getting like the ketone that I was using on a previous episode. Just the vapors of that are pretty intense. And this engine degreaser I was just using, carb cleaner, you know, these are things that go into your lungs, go into your bloodstream, and they do find their way into your cells. So how do we get rid of those toxins once they're literally inside of us and into a cellular level? I don't know if there's a perfect solution here, and I'm no doctor, but I do know a little bit about human physiology, and one thing that I've learned is that there's 3 ways your body naturally detoxifies. There's a process called methylation, and key to that, methylation is a way your body detoxifies and gets rid of things that shouldn't be there, like metals and other toxins. 3 things: urination, elimination, pooping, and sweat. And I have read that there are certain chemicals that can get into your body that will not come out of your body through either elimination or urination, and you need to sweat to get them out. So what's the message there? It's not enough to just poop and pee every day to detoxify your body. It's good to get out there and sweat. You know, you get to Northern Europe and you see people doing saunas, and you see people doing hot spas, things like that. But exercise is really the key one. So have exercise in your life. And then another thing I do is the foods that I eat, things that are preventative. Leafy, dark green vegetables like kale or Swiss chard, or you know, even broccoli on some level. That's not really leafy, but collard greens. Those kinds of vegetables, if they're a regular part of your diet, they've got phytochemicals in them that help detoxify the body. And then another thing I do is chlorella or spirulina. I'm not endorsing any one particular brand here, but chlorella is very detoxifying, and it's a binding agent, I guess, in the diet. And as it goes into the body, it attracts toxins to it, and then you eliminate them out. This is some things I do. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I'm trying to do something to take care of my health. Rubber gloves, safety goggles. I should wear a respirator more often than I do, frankly. But diet and exercise. So I no sooner say that I should be wearing gloves, and then I get back to a project like sanding and prepping a surface for painting, and I realize pretty quickly that a gloved hand, I can't feel whether that's smooth or not, kind of. So, you know, off comes the glove. I think there's just times where you gotta do what you gotta do and feel that. But of course my skin is going to absorb some of that primer, clear coat, paint, all of these chemicals that I'm using. That's another reason why dietary lifestyle and exercise are important. So if I wasn't out exercising, I could work on the bike more, and this thing would be done by now. Got to make those compromises in life. And since I like to talk about spiritual health a lot, exercise is great for that. What's good for the body is good for the mind, is good for the spirit. Back to sanding. Some of it's taking paint. That's a drip of that, small little drip of that rust treatment. So the level of detail gets pretty finite at some point if you want to have a fantastic result. We're getting there. We're getting pretty darn close to where we're going to move on to filling in all of these gaps, but I'm just taking it in sections and feeling for
the high spots. So we're close to done here for today. Okay, so that's going to have to be a wrap for this week. What I've got here is a smooth tank that's looking pretty rough, but we got some dents in it, and that'll take us into next week where we can start messing around with some Bondo body filler and glazing putty, or spot putty as some people call it, and we'll start filling in these dents and get everything smooth again and prep it for painting. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy what I'm doing. If you do like it, be sure to give us a thumbs up down here and subscribe, and you'll get alerted when I've got a new video up. Thanks for watching.